All right. What if I again use now the tip of the probe to lift up a clear membrane now on the inside of the heart here? Notice how there's a clear membrane going over the surface of the probe. I had to lift up the membrane to expose it. Endocardium, because now it is a membrane lining the inside of the heart, so hence its name of endocardium now that it's on the inside of the chamber. So much like we could lift up a membrane out here, it would be epicardium, but now lifting a membrane in here, endocardium.
Okay, makes sense.
Speak again.
Sure. When we lift up the inner lining of a chamber, this clear membrane here is now endocardium. What if I point to like here and ask you to name this layer? Myocardium. Notice how what I'm pointing at is actually the literally like the meat of the wall, so to speak, and that is the myocardium. Right? Especially if I actually even move through that region, you can tell just how fibrous it is, hence it is muscle, all those muscle fibers. How will that myocardium compare when I come over to this side of the heart and do cut?
It should be thicker.
Over here, it will be thicker. And I'm going to do the same thing.
That fluid that's in between,
Yeah, can you see the fluid? You can?
No. Because we don't have the parietal pericardium, and it's in between those layers, so we don't get that fluid.
Oh.
Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to start up at the auricle, cut down toward the base. This time I don't have to worry so much about cutting too deep, because if anything I'll probably have to go back in and cut even deeper because of how much thicker the wall is on this side.
Does the diagonal line that you mentioned at the beginning also indicate right and left?
Well, once you've oriented yourself front to back, you can then, of course, orient yourself right to left on either side of that line, yes.
Once it's the interior, the opposite, that's your
Yes.
left, that's your right, and that's your
but
left.
once you have it open on a practical for dissection, the only way we could tell is by the thickness.
By the thickness of the wall or the presence versus absence of the moderator band.
Those are the only two things they're gonna tell us. If we
Yeah.
moderate, we mess it up, right?
All right.
So if you're looking at the interior surface and it's the opposite, the right is the left and left is the right, right?
Right, because it's your perception, yes. Okay, so at this point, I have now cut down the entire left-hand side of the heart using my same tool to open it up, and notice how the walls that are being pushed aside are far thicker now than they were a moment ago. It's coming around, it's coming around.
Over here, Hart.
There we go. Notice how now the walls are quite a bit thicker. If we just jump back for a second for a basis of comparison, here's how thick they were before versus how much thicker they are now. Especially if I take this out of the way, you can tell just how thick this really is. So the left side automatically is, of course, going to be identifiable by that thickness of its wall.
Okay.
What's absent on this side? There is no moderator band. So when you are taking the practical and you sit down at a station with the sheep heart, ask yourself the questions, is the wall relatively thick or thin, and do I see a moderator band or not?
Yeah, but I only saw the moderated band before because you had the probe under it and it was sticking out.
You could still see it, look for it. Yeah, it's there.
And the moderator band is in the ventricle part?
Do we see
Yes.
it again without the probe under it?
Yeah. It's in the ventricle part. Okay. Where is it?
Right there.
Oh, okay, now I see it.
Yeah.
Of course.
Right ventricle.
Right, see the little, that's the moderator band right in here without the probe lifting up on it anymore, but it's there, right? So, exactly, the main idea is to make sure that when you look into the heart, that you know right versus left by either looking at the thickness of the wall, just cut this
That
up a
seems
little
to be
bit
the most
further.
distinct is the thickness of the
Yes,
wall, more
yes.
than the moderated band. I mean.
Very true.
Yeah, but if you sit down in the left side of the part first.
Right, that's the thing, because the two, like, let's say there are two different stations that have the sheep heart,
Right.
they might be on the opposite end of the room as each other, so having the right versus left comparison, you can't just flip it, you know? So using the absence versus presence of the moderator band as a second way to make sure you know which side you're looking at is a good way to go.
Okay.
So notice, of course, that a lot of the same things we identified on the other half can now still be attributed here. We could still point to things like the myocardium. We could still lift up on the endocardium. We could still lift up on the white strings as chordae tendineae, and we could still find the protruding muscles that attach to those chordae tendineae, which are again going to be the papillary muscles. Again, the white strings are the chordae tendineae, and there just happens to be a pretty good-sized papillary muscle right around here.
Okay.
You can actually tell the shape of it right here is actually like a little projection,
It is diaphragm string. It's
and that is that papillary muscle,
Are you gonna have it cut straight down the middle, or are you gonna have it like this?
like this. Yeah. Yeah, some instructors literally slice it in half and open it like a clam.
Okay.
I do the dissection differently. All right, well, what if I asked you to name this valve right here?
Left side mitral valve.
Either bicuspid or left AV or mitral. How did you know that it was the left AV? Because we're on the left half of the heart now. Which means that if I ask name the chamber here and you seem to be above that valve, it's the what? Left atrium. Down below the valve?
Left ventricle.
Left ventricle, exactly. So we basically want to make sure we can name the 2 major valves, the 4 major chambers, the 3 major layers, epi, myo, and endocardium. And we're going to do
The valve on the right side is the
tricuspid.
tricuspid.
Endocardium, remember, is when I lift up on a clear membrane on the inside of the heart. Right? It almost looks like the inside and the outside are like shrink wrapped in plastic. Of course it's not, it's the membrane, but that's what it looks like. Okay.
We're not gonna do no semi-lunar?
We're actually going to do 1 semilunar valve. Here's that. Notice how there's like a little passageway behind this bicuspid valve, and if I pass the probe through that passageway, I wind up up here.
Okay.
What blood vessel must this be? Even though I'm not going to ask that specific blood vessel, it must be the aorta, because where did I come out of? The left ventricle.
Okay.
What I'm now going to do is, you can actually tell when I now hold this up, that probe right now is going up through the aortic semilunar valve and into the aorta. The thing is, though, right now, we can't tell exactly where the valve is. We can tell that the probe must be passing through it, but we don't yet see it. So what I'm now going to do is lay this down, take my scalpel here, and cut right down onto the probe, such that I'll be able to like lift the probe right up. So let's do that. Just a little bit more. I know, right?
Maybe it's a new blade.
Yeah, you'll see how good our scalpels are when we start the cat dissection next week and you're trying to get through ribs with this.
Oh, fun.
It's like dissecting with a butter knife.
I gotta bring junior mints
Yeah.
for those Seinfeld things.
Yeah.
Who gets named the cat?
Sure, of course.
Cuddy.
Cuddy. Okay. So, notice what I've just exposed. I just cut through the wall of the aorta, such that what I'm holding apart with my fingers right now is that aortic wall. And notice how smooth the inside of that major artery that is in there. So, the thing is, that's not what I'm going to ask you, even though this is pretty obviously the aorta, the only major big blood vessel coming up out of this left ventricle. But what I'm most concerned about showing you right now, and I'll prop this up for a second, is this. At the base of the aorta, if I catch it just right, I can actually expose a little cup right here, a little cup here, and a third one over here.
At the base of the.
At the base of the aorta. So for
like
those standing
little
on this
cups of
side,
muscle
we
on
look
this?
into the aorta, and if I use the tip of the probe, I can expose a little soft flap, and another one beside it over here. And of course, one of them ends up being cut into when you open the aorta, but what do you think these cups are part of? The aortic
Aortic
semilunar
semilunar
valve.
valve.
Now for those more on this side, again, here is that aorta. Notice how at the base of that aorta, there's a little cup here, another little one beside it, And the idea, it's like